Okay, guys, well, welcome back. We're going to be covering module 3. And I think I can remember that most of you have done the homework. And I'm hoping that for most of this is review for you. Please feel free to interrupt at any time and let me know, right? So a little heads up for next week. Next week is sensory evaluation. And while each chapter in the book is written by a different group of authors, and so you'll notice there's a different tone in each chapter. And for the most part, I think the information is well written. I cannot say that about the sensory evaluation chapter. Okay, so just to let you know, I do not think that the chapter is written very carefully. I wrote a bunch of notes in Canvas, and you might want to go in and print those off. And then as you're reading the textbook, you can kind of refer back to my notes. So I just think it's a little bit disorganized and it just wasn't very well written. So it's the only chapter in the book that I just go, "Nah," right? I just don't understand it. So just a heads up on that. You'll notice that there will be 3 different assignments next week, one for each kind of sensory evaluation. They're all short, but I wanted to break them up so that you were aware that because it all tends to run together, so that the consumer sensory is different from the other 2 types of sensory, so that you can silo those in your learning, right? And so it can help. So I tried to simplify the information, and you're welcome, like I say, to print off the notes that I wrote in Canvas. You may have to do like a copy and paste or something like that, but you can do that. So the other thing is, and I'm going to do something different. So my grandson is graduating from high school on June 13th, and he lives in Mammoth, which means that he I'm driving up on Thursday, the 12th. So I wanted to know from you, hopefully are you seeing this poll? Okay. So I want to know from you, what would you like? What should we do? Shall we skip the meeting and you watch a video? Shall we hold the meeting on Wednesday?
Uh,
Shall we just skip the week and add one more week to the class? So, or you don't really care. So take a little time and think about what you would like. I all of those options are good for me.
I'm
So
not seeing any surveys. Anyone else?
Yeah, I got mine.
Huh.
I got mine too. I have voted.
Yeah, I voted already.
Okay.
look, maybe it's behind the window. Move the window.
I'm in gallery mode. Maybe that's it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Or you could just tell me, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm fine. Extending the class a week. It's always good to have a week to catch up, even though early on. But that's my 2 cents.
You can always work ahead, you know.
Mhm.
You could. You could work ahead.
You could.
You're good.
I'm more of a work behind kind of guy.
Yeah.
Hey guys, don't feel bad. I got bombarded and then spent one entire day, about 8 or 9 hours, completing everything. And if you go into my dashboard, it kindly reminds me that I was late, 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 late.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that I do not
But I
care.
got it done.
You got it.
It was a
Right.
marathon.
So I'm seeing I'm seeing 3, 4, 5, 6. So of the six people who voted, 3 of you said skip the week, right? And we'll just add one more week at the end of class. It means that the end of general culinology is going to come really close to the beginning of food science, but it's not, that doesn't bother me, right? And it'll give people a chance to catch up, or as I suggest, it would give you an opportunity to work ahead, so just in case there's somebody in your family who decides to graduate on Thursdays, right? Or something like that. So if that's okay with everybody, that's what we're going to do. So I'll send out a modified schedule to those people who aren't here. So who just joined us? Somebody just joined us.
Hi, it's Ben.
Hi, Ben. So, Ben, we were talking about my grandson is graduating from high school on the 13th, and so I have to travel on the 12th. So we've decided that we're going to just extend the class 1 week. So you're going to have an extra week to get your work done. So hope that's okay with you.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, great. All righty, that's what we're going to do then. So, but we will meet next week. See, I'll share it. So we will meet next week, and it's the week after, right? So just to plan ahead. All right. Okay, doke. Thank you very much for that input. I appreciate that. So so there's a whole bunch of learning objectives that come with this section, as you saw. What I've done is I've broken them up so that they aren't all together, so that when the ones that have to do with carbohydrate, we'll discuss when we talk about carbohydrate. The ones that have to do with protein, we'll talk about them then, rather than squishing all of this stuff into this 2 weeks. So today I'm just going to address 1, 5, and 7 right here. This there's something on my screen. What's that? What have I done? Let me get rid of this. Is annoying. There. Okay. So what I've done today is I'm going to talk about the micro and macronutrients and the phytochemicals a little bit. And these are the 6 categories of essential nutrients. So many of you are worried about, well, what is the function of this one? And what is the function of this vitamin? What's the function of that vitamin? And I'm going to suggest to you that these are only 3 learning objectives out of 4 or 5 pages of learning objectives. And I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on that. It could possibly represent maybe 1 or 2 questions. So if we prioritize it that way, and the other thing that I'm going to suggest to you is that we can lump them together, and we don't have to learn every individual one. You know, you're not going to be a nutrition instructor. You don't have to know the function and the food sources and the yada, 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 yada for each one of them, but rather we can lump them together in by category. And that way you can learn, you know, just kind of a general overall, and you might be able to bluff the question a little bit. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, there are 6 classes of nutrients. So there's carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and water. And we call these macro meaning large nutrients, macronutrients, and they're measured in grams. So a gram is the weight of a paperclip. So we talk about carbohydrate and lipids and protein. We use milliliters for water, but, you know, or milligrams for water, but those are all the big things, the big ones that we do. Then there are 2 other categories. There's vitamins and minerals. And we call these the micronutrients, and we measure them in milligrams and micrograms. So a milligram is 1,000 times smaller than a gram. So what we're talking about is grains of sand, little itty bitty tiny bits, right? Not a whole lot. And then when we talk about the vitamins and minerals, the vitamins, there are 2 major classes. And as they sound like, there's water soluble and fat soluble. So water soluble ones, when you drop them in water, they dissolve in water, just like vinegar and water or anything else. The fat soluble ones, when you drop them in fat, they dissolve in fat. So that's why they're grouped like that. So if you drop a fat soluble vitamin in water, it's not gonna, it's like vinegar and oil, right? It's not gonna work. So those are the two categories. And then when we get to minerals, there are minerals that we need a lot of, and those are called the macro minerals. And then there are other minerals that are sometimes called the trace minerals. I should write that in here. They're called the trace minerals. And they are what we see in a small amounts, and we measure them in milligrams. And you may recognize some of these, right? If you work in especially in a bakery, like if you make crackers or something, or if you work with a product that oxidizes, you always you talk about chelating some of these because they accelerate the oxidation. So the zinc, copper, iodine, so those are the minerals that give us problems when we worry about oxidation. So those are the 6 categories of nutrients. Clear so far? Yeah, all right. It's always good to start with something easy, right? So, of course, there's subcategories for each one of these. So we can start with, so maybe I can be a little more entertaining. We can start with, we'll start with the carbohydrates. So carbohydrates provide 4 calories per gram, and they are our primary energy. That's their primary function, is energy. And we use them to run and walk and talk and carry on. These are our energy nutrients. Energy in nutrition is measured in calories. So that might be helpful too. Measured in calories, right? So, so and the carbohydrates provide 4 calories per gram. Again, a gram is the weight of a paperclip. So according to the nutrition information, notice that about 45 to 65% of our calories should come from carbohydrates. Right? So big half of our calories should come from carbohydrates. And we could break those carbohydrates down into sugar, starch, and fiber down here. So the difference, and all of these are made of long chains of sugar molecules hooked together. So the monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose. Starch is a long, really, really big chain of glucose. And fiber is a long chain of often fructose and glucose and galactose and hooked together in a strange way, right? So when we get to carbohydrates, we're going to talk more about these, and we are going to be talking about and learning the names of all of the different sugars and how they go together. But for now, I'm just going to say that sugar and starch. And these are digestible. So remember last week when I was talking about digestion? So if you eat sugar or you eat starch, it goes into your stomach and the first part of your small intestine, and the pancreatic enzymes digest the starch and sugars into their monosaccharides, which is the glucose, fructose, or galactose. And that is what's absorbed, and that's what circulates in our body. Questions? No? Okay. I was glad to hear from a couple of you that you really enjoyed the discussion about digestion. Digestion is not on the exam, but yet I feel like we can't really talk about nutrition if you don't understand what happens, right? Because the naive view of nutrition is that you put it in, let's say if I eat animal proteins, I build muscle, but it's not like that, right? You eat protein and then you work really hard and then you build muscle. So I think it's important that that I talk a little bit about digestion before we start. Okay, so what's the difference? The difference between these here and fiber here. And the difference is that fiber is indigestible. So fiber is really important in nutrition. It helps us with elimination, removes cholesterol and things from the body. So fiber is really important. Fiber is one of those nutrients that we like to encourage people to eat more of. Our American diet is not high enough in fiber. So ways to find and add fiber to the diet are important. Right? So these provide 4 calories per gram, and in general, fiber provides 0 calories per gram. There are some fibers that provide a little bit, the resistant starches and stuff like that. But overall, if you just think about it, there's no calories. So they're a magic food. We can eat as much as we want until you get a upset stomach, right? I also think it's important that when we do this, that we differentiate between the sugars that are present in fruits and vegetables and those that are added. Nobody is concerned about the sugar that's in fruits and vegetables. Eat your fruits and vegetables to your heart's content, right? In fact, your heart would love it if you would eat lots of fruits and vegetables. Don't worry about the sugar that's in there. The sugar we're concerned about is added sugar. And that article that I sent you, while that information won't be on the exam, I thought it was really interesting. Talks about how really harmful fructose is as an added sugar. So high fructose corn syrup stuff.
That makes me happy to hear. I kind of hate fructose. Like birch syrup, people were using that for a while, and it's really high in fructose. I always thought it tasted kind of funny.
Yeah, and agave is really high in fructose as well.
That's another one I'm not a fan of personally.
Yeah. Just use plain old ordinary sugar, right? And there's nothing the matter with that. So anyway, so the one that we're concerned about again is the added sugar. So if you were formulating a product and you'll notice that you look at the food label, for instance, added sugars are called out special because we would like people to eat less added sugar. Not only and mostly because they're empty calories. So what I mean by empty calories is that you get calories, but you don't get any vitamins and minerals or fiber. So they're empty calories. Right? That doesn't mean we never can eat sugar. All foods are included in a healthy diet, just some in more moderation than others. Okay. Any questions? All right. So just going back, of course, the fiber is divided into the indigestible fiber, the soluble fiber. Oh, excuse me, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, and then there is a little bit of resistant starch, which is making headlines, but which is really not. It is a prebiotic, and the bacteria that live in your large intestines like that. So that's where it gets a lot of press. The difference between soluble and insoluble fiber is that the insoluble fiber, what goes in goes out. So if it's like wheat bran, it goes in, it passes through the tube that is our digestive system, and it goes out, and it increases your stool volume and holds water in the stool and makes more comfortable elimination. Soluble fiber is like oat fiber. You know, when you overcook oatmeal and you get that slimy stuff, right? When it gets kind of slimy, that's the soluble fiber. And it was getting a lot of press not too long ago, including oatmeal, because it binds cholesterol and removes cholesterol from the body. So most of the cholesterol that circulates in your blood is manufactured in the liver. So and so if you could remove some of that with soluble fiber, that's really good. So that's the function of that. Recommended intake is 25 to 30 grams or 14 grams per 1,000 calories. Any questions about carbohydrate? Again, we're going to go, this is just an overview, right? I'm going to tell you all this stuff again later on. Okay? So any questions? So don't worry about it if you don't get it all. Just go for the highlights. So the second group, and I should talk a little faster. The second group is lipids. So lipids are fats and oils, and they provide 9 calories per gram. That's 2.5 times more calories per gram than carbohydrates and proteins. So that's why when we talk about a low-calorie diet, we kind of focus on fat. Because if you can remove some of the fat, you're removing a lot calories, a lot more. If you remove the carbohydrates, you're not removing as many calories. So removing the fat will remove twice as many calories. So that's why a low-fat diet, most diets are lower in fat because of that. The recommendation is between 20 and 35% of your total calories. And that ideally should be between saturated, mono, and polyunsaturated. And we'll talk about those later. Overall, increase the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the PUFA, and decrease the saturated and trans fats. That's the dietary recommendation. So fewer saturated fats, the ones that are really good for frying, like the things that are solid at room temperature.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Ms. Gold.
yes,
I
yes.
have a quick question, and maybe this isn't really something we need to dive into, but obviously, because of all this study over the past like 2 weeks with nutrition, I'm looking at labels even more than normal. And so, where do I get trans fatty? Like, where do I get trans fats? Because I feel like a lot of that has been removed from labels over the past few years, but I've just been kind of searching for it.
Yeah, so
Not that I'm hungry, but I'm just.
yeah. The majority of the trans fat came to us through partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. So that has been removed from our diet. So the majority of the trans fats have been removed for our diet, but there are some naturally occurring ones that we don't need to worry about when we eat, right? But dairy has some, and I'd have to look it up specifically. I think maybe there's some in meat. So there is some naturally occurring trans fat, but we don't have to worry about that. But the ones that seem to be associated with heart disease, where excuse me, the saturated, the ones from partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. And that, of course, has changed. And they have now changed the processing of the hydrogenated vegetable oil so that it doesn't have any trans fats anymore. They figured out how to make it without the trans fats. So yeah, but it's still on the label, right?
We're required to list that on the label, right? I think last time we made labels, it was one of the requirements.
Yes, it is still part of the label, but actually forcing people to put it on the label really did a great job because most people have removed it from their food sources. So, but there is a little bit of naturally occurring.
I think peanut butter is one of the ones where they still use hydrogenated fat, like non-natural peanut butters. That's
Yeah, but they use one that's low in trans fats. So I hope, I'm sure they do actually. So without checking the label, I'm going to brave and say that. But we used to use it a lot for frying. Saturated fats are the best frying fats ever, right? If you want a crispy outside and a soft, fresh inside, then you want to use a saturated fat. If you fry a French fry in a saturated fat and you fry another one in a vegetable oil, the one in the vegetable oil just didn't quite make it, right? It's not crispy on the outside. So that's when they started coating the French fries with all different kinds of things in order to make up for the difference, and obviously if you want to make a pie crust, for instance, you have to use the saturated fat. So, but like I say, the processing has changed. But good question, Ben. So we don't want to worry too much about that, though. You can let that one go. All right. Looking at fats and oils, there are two essential fatty acids. Fats are made out of fatty acids. They're and a glycerol molecule, and we'll talk about that later. But there are two of them that are essential: linolenic and linoleic. Essential in nutrition means that we don't manufacture it in our body, so we have to eat it. We may manufacture, but we don't manufacture enough of it. So linolenic is an omega-3 and linoleic omega-6, and that just means where the first double bond is. And we talk about the linolenic is more unsaturated, and so like cold water fish. I always like this analogy. So cold water fish is where we get all of the omega-3 fat, a lot of our omega-3 fatty acids. And if you think about that, it's a cold water fish, so it has to be more polyunsaturated so that it doesn't get stiff when the water freezes, right? If it had saturated fat in it, that fish would get stiff and he wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't be able to swim, right? Because it's a cold water animal, right? So that's why we look to things like the cold water fish for omega-3 fatty acids. The linolenic is found in grains mostly. So these are essential, and so we need to get them in our diet. So just know there are two. We already talked about artificial trans fatty acids. Here we go. Look at that. I put this in the notes. Milk and meat in small quantities, Ben. Right? Okay.
Hey, Jill, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the linolenic and linoleic and omega-3s. I don't know, 5 or so years ago, there was a big trend to season your cast iron skillets with flaxseed oil. And when I did so, I got kind of a fishy smell. It almost smelled like salmon. So is that tied together, that whatever the aroma is okay?
Right. And not
Okay.
only that, the more polyunsaturated it is, the more likely it is to oxidize and turn
Okay.
rancid, right?
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons that you want to use do you use mineral oil sometimes, or do you use a saturated fat to season your cast iron?
Well, normally I would use just a vegetable oil or something like that. But I had read there was an article and someone had done testing and said flaxseed was the best. So I tried it, but I found that it gave that kind of an off smell.
Yeah.
Hey, Dennis,
Yeah.
speaking as somebody who cooks in nothing but iron pans,
Yeah.
I season all my pans with tallow,
Okay.
and I grind fat and render tallow myself. So basically, before and after every single use,
Mhm.
I wipe my pans with tallow.
Okay.
It'll never turn rancid. You're not going to get any foul odors. It's going to be your best bet.
Dinner
Okay.
party at Trevor's.
What was that?
I said dinner party at Trevor's.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Right. And see, I agree with you, Trevor. The tallow is a saturated fat, and nutritionally, it isn't going to make a difference one way or the other what you season your pan with, because the amount of fat that is going to transfer from the pan into your food is insignificant, right? So you want one that's going to be more saturated, like your tallow, so that it doesn't go rancid, right? And get weird on you. Right. So
thank you.
that bad flavor will transfer to your food.
Right. Well, yeah, I stopped doing
Well,
that.
Right. Okay. Well, good. Thank you very much, Trevor. That is great. Okay. So fat is important in our diet. You'll notice that it was about 30% of our calories. So it is important in the diet. So it is a primary fuel for endurance exercise. So if you're a long distance runner, you need some fat. It is, we require oxygen to burn it, so it takes a while for the body to get into that mode, of burning fat. So it is important. Not only that, you really can be too thin. It cushions your organs. It's a long-term energy storage. If you should happen to get sick, it's good to have a little extra fat. And of course, it's the fat source of the fat soluble vitamins. So fat is important in the diet.
Jill, did you just say you need oxygen to burn fat?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Okay. So carbohydrate is anaerobic.
Uh-huh.
Your body can burn the carbohydrate to for energy, and you don't need oxygen. It's the quick energy source. So it's the energy source for sprinting and when you first start to exercise, right? But it's anaerobic, right?
Okay.
Make sure I'm saying this right. I haven't said it for a long time. But fat requires oxygen. So you need to get your heart pumping, you need to get, the oxygen, you need to be breathing, you need to get it. And it's for long, slow endurance exercise. We always are burning a little bit of carbohydrate, but the object is to maintain that as long as possible, especially if you're talking about marathons and things, ultra marathons and stuff like that. So we want to preserve that carbohydrate because we're always burning just a little bit of, but when we get into, well, maybe you do, not me, long-term exercise, then we do need oxygen.
Like weightlifting.
No, like marathon running.
Oh, okay.
Like the Jane Fonda
Weightlifting.
aerobic workout.
Hmm?
Like I'm just used to that from the 80s aerobic fad. So the aerobic workout
Am
thing.
I saying it backwards, Monto?
Oh, I don't know. I was agreeing with you, I think, but
Oh, good.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about though.
I will research it and make an announcement, okay? I'm sure I'm saying it right, but probably not very clearly.
I think I think I've kind of read that same thing where like for quick burst energy, it's the sugars that you burn initially for a sprint or even in basketball, like a quick like the quick movements, but then during the course of the game, it turns into well, it's a mix, of course, of sort of like
Yeah.
fast and slow,
Yeah.
and the oxygen is kicking in afterwards and burning fat.
Right, right. So you could think about that like when you like if you're going to do a long run, right? So when you first start, you burn mostly carbohydrate because that's anaerobic because you haven't got the oxygen into your muscles. And then as you move along and you get into the flow of things and over time, then you begin to burn fat, right? But if you come to a hill and you need to go up a hill, now you need to work harder. So you're going to need a little more carbohydrate, and then you can so it's the quick burst of stuff that the carbohydrate and the fat is for the long term, but more like long and consistent like running, right?
Siri agreed with you too.
Everybody agrees. Oh, yes, I said it right. I'm going,
I
oh,
asked Siri and it said a high percentage is burned during aerobic exercise.
oh, Siri is so smart. All right, I need to move along, otherwise we're not going to get near the end of this thing. So, protein supplies 10 to 35% of our calories. It also provides 4 calories per gram. So the four calories per gram. So it's about the same like carbohydrate. Um, Protein is different. It's probably the most complex. And in this discussion, everybody was asking a lot of questions about protein. And again, we will cover that later. But protein is made up of 20 to 25 different amino acids that are important in nutrition. There are lots more. And there are 8 or 9, depending on what book you read, that are considered essential. And again, essential in our world means that we cannot manufacture them or cannot manufacture enough of them. So in the body, when it builds proteins, it goes, okay, it's like Legos. You know, I want one of these and one of those, one of those, one of those. Oops, not there. Oh, well, break it up, start over. One of these, one of those, one of those. So it's kind of like Legos, right? Each one looks a little bit different, and they all come together and they form a protein. So the difference between a protein and a peptide is just the length of the chain. How many amino acids are hooked together. So 2 to 50 amino acids is a short chain, and that's called a peptide. But most amino acids are hundreds. I mean, most proteins are hundreds of amino acids hooked together. And not only are proteins important for body structure, like your muscles but they're also your hair, your fingernails. So there are structural, are the collagen, the tendons, our organs, all of those things, but also enzymes and hormones that are the regulators of the body and keep it functioning, are also proteins. So protein is really, really important, but there's very little use in over consuming protein. There's no point in consuming tons and tons and tons of protein, because after we have all of the essential amino acids and we have all the protein we need, the rest of that protein is just used for energy. So it's a very expensive source of energy. It's expensive because it costs more, and it's expensive because the body then has to work harder to turn it into energy and to eliminate the nitrogen. So it's an expensive source. So there's no point, in way over consuming protein, right? And there's all these protein powders, protein bars, and all this sort of stuff. And mostly they're not very useful, because most of us, unless you happen to be a vegan or a vegetarian with a really bizarre kind of diet, or you only eat a very few kinds of foods, most of us consume more than enough protein. Protein is completely digested, and the different proteins are rated on what's called the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. And I say PDCAS. I don't know really how it's pronounced, but that's how I pronounce it. And so different proteins are rated based on the different amino acids that are present, the amount of each amino acid that is present, and the digestibility of it. So those are rated based on our nutritional need. So the closer the food matches to our nutritional need, the higher the protein score is going to be. And if 1 or 2 of the amino acids it's missing are very low, it's going to have a lower score. It's also based on digestibility, because if that protein is wrapped in fiber and we can't digest the fiber, then we can't get to the protein. So things like egg white and casein have the really highest numbers, but then we look at soy and stuff like that, and the numbers are much lower.
And Jill, for cooking the proteins, like the amino acids are present, like if it's supposedly like cooked properly, like what happens if the meat is like overcooked or abused? Do you not get that same nutritional value and all of the amino acids that were carried in it in its raw or properly cooked phase?
That's a great question, Laura. You're real crackly. So,
Sorry.
my, that's no problem. So, yes, that's a great question. So, if the protein is denatured and if it loses its structure because we overcooked it, let's think about an egg white. If you have an egg white and you overcook it and all that it gets crinkly and all that, the egg, run down by the pan, then
Mhm.
that is not available and it's just eliminated from the body, right?
Okay.
But in general, if you overcook it, it's not going to have, like if moist keep cooking or any of those are not going to have any effect on the protein unless it's really badly denatured. So we'll talk about that later.
'Cause I
But
think of eating raw eggs isn't necessarily better than eating cooked eggs. It's just an easier way to consume. Like, in Rocky, he like drinks down a bunch of raw eggs and
right. Raw eggs are not a good source, right? As we know, they're an excellent source of salmonella. So in general, best not to consume any raw eggs. You can pasteurize them, but just cook them. They're the same, right? Nothing special happens when you cook them. And just like pasteurization in milk, nothing of significance is destroyed in pasteurization of milk. So do please drink pasteurized milk, right? Please, unless you're a real risk taker.
Jill, I have a question. You said when the protein is denatured, the nutritional value changes. Is that saying if the pH is lower than the protein's isoelectric point, it loses nutritional value because it
Uh,
will be denatured?
It's mostly, Lynn, excellent question. And mostly that has to do with like frying it and turning it in. If like if you made cottage cheese, right? So you add acid to the milk and it curds, all of that is still present. All of the amino acids are still present. Yeah. So the curding and stuff like that doesn't affect the amino acid content. It's mostly if you really, really abuse it, like we can do with egg white.
Okay, perfect. Thank
And
you.
good question. And everybody else is going, what is Lynn talking about? And we will get there, right? Okay, so water is probably our most important nutrient when we think about the short term. We can die of dehydration in 2 or 3 days, depending on the temperature and whether exposed to the outside. But it takes weeks to die from malnutrition, or from not eating. So water is the most critical. The recommendation is 2 to 2 liters, which is about 8 cups of water a day. It does not have to be water. There's water in coffee and tea and soup and all kinds of things. So it can come from a variety of different things. Probably better if it doesn't come from things that are really high in sugar. Just saying, that's probably not the best choice. And you certainly don't have to add things to it like sodium and stuff for like sports drinks and things like that. In general, plain water. You can drink too much water. You can kill yourself by drinking too much water, but that's really hard. You have to work at it. But loss of 1 to 2% of your body weight will create thirst, fatigue, and weakness. But when you get to 7 to 10% of the body weight, dizziness and muscle spasms, delirium and collapse. So serious. And if any of you have any elderly people in your life and they begin to act like they're kind of demented, or they have maybe, some more mental problems, oftentimes it's a result of dehydration. Old people don't recognize their thirst as much, and they forget to drink, or maybe they're having incontinence issues and they don't want to drink, right? And so they can easily become dehydrated because the percentage of body water in an old person is a lot less than it is in a young person. So if you're responsible for taking care of somebody, be sure that they get plenty of fluids in their diet. Just speaking as an old person. So so that's water. So we looked at now the macronutrients, the carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and water. Those are the macronutrients. And what I put here is probably more information than you need to know about each one of those. And again, we will cover them later. Of the micronutrients, the ones we need only a little bit of, there are two groups of vitamins, the water-soluble vitamins, folate, riboflavin, vitamin B12, and vitamin C. And I put the pictures in here so you can see what they look like. In general, they work in conjunction with each other, right? They are all soluble in water. And so they are mostly involved with metabolism. You see metabolism, right? And so mostly they have to do with the release of energy in the Krebs cycle, which is way more information than you need to know. And but they all work together. So if I were to memorize these, I would say these are the water-soluble vitamins. Folate is a little bit special. It's associated with spina bifida, which is a problem with young babies if the mother doesn't have enough folate, and the spinal column is on the outside, and it's really serious. And so we've started fortifying white bread with folate, and that seems to be helping the problem. Riboflavin, vitamin B12, and vitamin C. Thiamine, biotin, all of those are water-soluble vitamins. And for the most part, if you remember that they are found in fruits and vegetables, they are water-soluble. And so, and they all kind of work on metabolism. It's kind of a general way that you could think about that. Let's see what else I was going to say. Something else. Oh, because they're water soluble, we treat them all the same way when we talk about cooking. We're worried about leaching into the water. So for instance, if we were to cook a vegetable, we want to kind of steam it rather than boil it and throw away the water. Or if you're processing and you're peeling or whatever, you want to minimize the amount of water that food comes into contact with, because if that water is then discarded, all the vitamins and minerals leach, not all, but a lot leach into the water. So we're concerned about every time water comes in contact with the food. So if we can think about it that way, because they're water soluble. So ways to prevent losing them, they also heat liable a little bit, but we don't worry too much about that. So the B vitamins, and I talked about the Krebs cycle, but you can see in here, this is what the body does to release energy from food. And if you look at here, you can see that these ones right here, this is niacin. Here's the B vitamins, B1, B2, B5. So you can see here's the CoQ10, which is not an essential vitamin. And so you can see that they're all here, and this is metabolism. Metabolism is the converting the food into energy. That's the definition of metabolism. So, and they are enzymes, and we'll talk about what an enzyme is later. Questions?
What's NADH? I've never seen that term before.
Oh God.
Is it important?
It's a part of niacin. It's a breakdown of niacin.
Okay.
Sorry, Mondo. Oh, no, it wasn't 40 years since I studied the Krebs cycle. Maybe 50. Okay. Fat soluble vitamins. They all dissolve in fat. That's why they're called fat soluble vitamins. And they are destroyed by heat and oxygen. So when we talk about preserving these vitamins, we talk about not exposing them to oxygen as much as possible and heat. And many of these are colors. So beta carotene is orange in color, retinol, orange, right? And the thing about these is that they can be toxic in large amounts. So consuming extras of these can actually be toxic. But if we look at them and look at the pictures, you'll see these long chains right here. These actually reflect light, and that's where the color comes from, is the reflection of the light in these long chains like this. So, vitamin K is manufactured in the gut by the friendly bacteria that live in your gut. So again, think about these all together as one group, and these are fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. There's only 4 of them, so everything else is water soluble. And we can say that these are the fat soluble vitamins. And so when we think about them and exposure to oxygen and light and heat. So we want to minimize that. All right, then looking at the minerals. So minerals are stable. They're like calcium, like chalk. They can't be destroyed, but they can be lost. So every time you peel something, they're going to get lost, or they can dissolve in water. They're the major minerals. When we think about them, we want to think about them in groups. So what we do is we balance that out. So we have sodium, which is in salt, right? And potassium that's in fruits and vegetables. What we want, if we look at our diet, is to increase the potassium and decrease the sodium for optimum health. So one is on the inside of the cell and one is on the outside of the cell, and they have to do with the transfer. The FDA is really concerned about sodium in our diet, and they lowered it to 2,300 milligrams per day. I haven't heard anything that they're going to lower it more, but they are threatening. They're always threatening to lower the sodium. So as a food processor, we're concerned about that because sodium controls water activity, and water activity is a food safety issue. So if you start lowering the sodium in your diet, in the food, the same as if you lower the sugar in your food, then you're going to have to look at water activity, and it's a food safety issue. So worrying about that. Calcium and phosphorus, we want those in balance. We tend to eat too much phosphorus and not enough calcium. We don't like dairy, so we don't need, we think adults don't need dairy, but dairy is our best source of calcium unless you like spinach a whole lot. And so what we like to do is decrease things that have a lot of phosphorus in them and increase the calcium. So think about those in pairs: sodium, potassium, calcium, phosphorus. And then finally, the trace minerals, iron. We're really, if you're going to focus on iron, iodine, fluoride, even if whatever his name is against fluoridation, I think fluoridation is very helpful for and not harmful. Okay. I put a little bit here about phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are other things that come from plants that are not essential in the diet, but improve our health. And so there's a couple of cool articles here, phytochemicals, and a little bit about some of those. I know I rushed at the end. Somebody have one last question? A couple of people have left us already because I'm running out of time. But anybody have any? I'm willing to stay, but does anybody have any last questions?
Just a comment. Me and my brother tested your hypothesis about sugar substitutes increasing your tolerance for sweetness, and I think you're absolutely right. For like
Um,
3, 4 days, he just ate things with sugar substitutes, and he said later everything just felt not sweet enough to him. Fruits, especially, just seemed like weak.
yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right.
That's my personal opinion. So Monto's talking about somebody talked about last year, which some sugar substitute. All the sugar substitutes are safe from a physiological point of view. My objection to sugar substitutes is that they teach you to like things that are too sweet, right? It's artificially sweet. So then you go to have an orange or a tangerine or something like that, and it's not sweet enough anymore, right? It isn't satisfying. So my objection to artificial sweeteners is that they make the things that I should be eating not taste good enough. So I'm glad you tested that out, Monto.
Yeah, we figured it would work, but it was absolutely true. He said it was the degree to which it was correct was kind of astounding.
And I think people don't recognize that, right? And, if we want to eat more fruits and vegetables, I think it's important. So, well, cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. We will talk about artificial sweeteners and also about fat substitutes later in the class. Okay. All righty. So that was a down and dirty, but remember that don't panic, right? Don't panic. We're going to talk about each one of these again later. So not to panic. We will be having class next week. Next week, I'm going to talk about sensory evaluation. So we will not be having class on the 12th, but I will add another week to the class in the end. So it gives you kind of a chance. And you can work ahead. Dennis is going, no, we can't. And nobody ever does. But I'm telling you, now is a really good opportunity. And then one really last thing is that if you get behind, if you miss a week, leave that week and work on the week that we're working on this time. You will have time at the end of class to go back and fix that. If you try and catch up doing that, you'll never, ever catch up. So if you have to miss a week, you go on vacation or something, just leave that. This is not math. You don't have to learn how to add before you can multiply or whatever. So just go on and work on our current week. And that way you won't get so frustrated. Okay? Because I know life happens, right? You get busy at work and family and all those kinds of things. Okay? And John, congratulations on getting accepted to get ready for the exam. You're welcome. Yeah. So John submitted it. So if you want information about how to submit your applications, you can contact John. All right.
Hey Jill, so it seems like people are passing on the first time a lot more than when we first started. Do you feel like the test might be getting easier? It's like
I just think people are taking it more seriously and just, and those people who took it have been messing around in my classes for a while.
yeah.
They weren't all first time people, right? So yeah, but everybody's passing. It's like super, super exciting. I'm really happy for everybody, right? So that makes me know that it works,
Yeah,
right?
practice exam is coming soon for me.
Yes, it's about your time, Monto.
MDO.
Yes, it's time to get this behind you and to move on to something else. Right? I've been pushing on Monto for about 6 months now, so nothing new there.
Elder care industry right now, so
You're what?
my dad's getting sick, so I'm kind of we figured out funding that I can spend full time caring for him.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm very happy for you. Right.
But we got it was
I'm
the
not
end.
happy. I'm not happy because your dad's sick. I'm happy because you're going to have that opportunity to be with him.
He's actually hung out really long. We didn't expect that. So now we're kind of like, well, I got to get back to work.
Yeah, I know that. Well, let me stop this recording.